Mixed martial arts is viewed as one of, if not the most, brutal, violent, and masculine sports to participate in. Barring a literal duel to the death, MMA is the purest form of competition that can exist between two men. A fight isn't just an opportunity for an athlete to showcase the skills he has been honing for years or even decades. It also is a clash of wills between him and his opponent, a contest to see who can break who. That is why fans view fighters as modern-day gladiators, and the cage that they spill their blood in as our era's Colosseum. Of course, the sheer violence of the fight game isn't palatable for many people, and that is why the vast majority of fight fans are young to middle-aged men. From Gen Z guys in college doing UFC watch parties on Discord, to grizzled unks reminiscing about the glory days of Pride, the fan base for mixed martial arts is overwhelmingly male. Or, that is what I thought, until one day I found a certain tweet on my feed. Relationships. Islam Makhachev / Khabib Nurmagomedov, 87.
Brother.
And it was at that moment I knew that there was a whole different side to the MMA fanbase that had gone completely unnoticed and undiscussed in mainstream discourse. Until, of course, now. So my dear viewers, allow me to take you on a guide to the craziest part of the MMA fanbase that you never knew existed. And that is the insane world of UFC fanfiction. Now, since I know that the vast majority of my audience are straight guys, many of you may not know anything about online fanfiction, the platforms where it's published, the terminology, and the communities that write it. So, before we get into the UFC fanfiction specifically, I'd like to give all of you chuddies a brief overview of what online fanfiction is like. And don't ask how I know all of this, because, I don't want to get outed myself. First off, as you might be vaguely aware, almost all online fanfiction is written and consumed by women, where it has become one of the most popular pastimes for females in the age of the internet. With a negligible number of exceptions, online fanfiction contains a heavy emphasis on romance and usually includes sexual encounters, many of which, as you can tell from the thumbnail of this video, are extremely explicit. And the women who write explicit fanfiction, and specifically explicit fanfiction that involves relationships between men, are known as fujoshi, or fujoshi to use the English pronunciation. Fujoshi, in Japanese, literally means rotten girl or spoiled girl, with the term being a pejorative that has been reclaimed by women who write such fanfiction. Fanfiction of two men being intimately involved is known as bieru, which is an abbreviation of boys love, or boys love. The four big sites where fanfiction is published are Archive of Our Own, often abbreviated as AO3, Wattpad, Tumblr, and fanfiction.net. However, for this video, we will only be examining the content on AO3, Wattpad, and Tumblr, as those are the ones that have active MMA fanfiction-related communities. And well, just as a preview of what I found, let's just say that there is an entire tag dedicated to Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev's dating life as gay lovers under the hashtag Khabisu, where users post content like this. Yari yari Is-chan, you truly are my double champ.
Habib-kun, I finally won the fight against JDM. Nya.
I will also add that there seems to be a vibrant community of fujoshi on TikTok who post edits of Khabib and Islam grappling together, albeit I will not be going down that rabbit hole in this video. And before I go into my very deep and tight analysis of all of this content, I just want to put a disclaimer here. Please do not go out of your way to harass the users who are posting this content. And just remember that if you're doing stuff like thirsting after Nina drama in Twitter replies, following accounts like MMA Babes, or getting blocked by Alexa Grasso on Instagram for asking for feet pics over and over and over again, then you're doing the male equivalent of this, if not worse, especially if you're commenting directly on the social media of female fighters. But anyways, without further ado, let's get started. So, let's get started with the site that led me down this rabbit hole in the first place, Archive of Our Own. And well, after doing countless hours of research on this platform, I have to say this. There is a good reason why I put Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev in the thumbnail of this video. And it's not because I'm a hater or because I'm trying to rage bait their male fanbase. The vast majority of UFC fanfiction on Archive of Our Own is fanfiction of Khabib and Islam doing the deed. And here are the numbers. Conor McGregor, the biggest star in the history of the UFC, 27 fanfics involving him. Jon Jones, the man who's considered to be the GOAT of MMA by the majority of the fanbase, 4 fanfics. Paddy Pimblett, 12. And I'll add that most of those fanfictions are of Paddy Pimblett and the reader, who is assumed to be a woman, being intimately involved. And Alexander Volkanovski, the greatest featherweight of all time, he's tagged in a single fanfic, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't do anything weird in it. And now, guess how many fanfictions there are of Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev. 108 for Khabib and 112 for Islam.
Brother.
I repeat, 108 for Khabib and 112 for Islam. And in almost all of these, they are portrayed as dating and having intimate relations with one another, with said intimate relations often being described in very graphic detail. And the intimate relations that they have in these stories have elements in them that would make even Jon Jones blush. Just to give you an example, here's a fanfiction titled, They Can Hear Me Crying All Around the World, a 9,346 word long story that is still ongoing. And while I can't read aloud all of the tags here, let me articulate a few of them. Ahem. Spit roasting, accidental voyeurism, verbal humiliation, verbal degradation, internalized homophobia, and of course, comb swallowing. And as you can read in the summary right here, the story is about Islam Makhachev walking in on Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov getting f***ed by a bunch of men. And the funny thing is, this writer has some ball knowledge, because the note says, quote, basically, 2013 Islam and Khabib, right after the Tavares fight, i.e. when Khabib was the hottest, and realistically, should have taken a ding-dong or two. Halfway through the tone shifts like crazy, so heads up. So this writer actually knows that Khabib fought Thiago Tavares back in 2013, which is ball knowledge that I'm pretty certain even someone like Lucas Tracy wouldn't know. But anyways, for the purposes of literary criticism, allow me to do a dramatic reading of this content. And here it goes. Chapter 1. I Can't Help It Either Way. It's just something I always wanted to do. That was the only explanation Khabib could give Islam after Islam walked in on this, whatever this was. It was early on in Khabib's UFC career, when the fame was really getting to him and he had so much more access to whatever he wanted. Islam assumed that would entail normal vices, like new designer clothes or shiny cars, or maybe even some more serious temptations, like gambling or alcohol. He would have never expected this. He didn't even know Khabib, his mentor and role model, would be this depraved, but when he walked into that hotel room after Khabib's latest fight, he couldn't believe his eyes. And here he walks in on Khabib openly pleasuring himself, entirely unbothered at being watched, and I will spare you the anatomy.
No BS tonight, yes?
Khabib said in English as he stroked himself.
I not need you to sign NDA, right?
He finally spread his thighs, letting them see his slick ding-dong before pulling his legs back up closer to his torso, revealing his ass.
How is this?
Khabib continued with a sly smile.
Now you can say you fighter from UFC.
Islam's jaw dropped as he watched. He didn't recognize these guys, but they seemed pretty specific. Khabib had a type, similar to his favorite fighters in the organization. He liked strong builds. He liked those classic heavyweights. He liked big, impressive physiques, ones you could stare at in awe. That almost made this worse. Maybe if Islam stumbled upon him with some feminine pretty boy, Khabib could make some sort of excuse. No, In this situation, Khabib was going to be eaten alive.
I am 18-0, undefeated.
He elaborated, letting his head fall back on the pillow.
But I sure you know, you all watch tonight, yes?
One of them yanked Khabib across the bed by his arm and whispered something in his ear, causing Khabib to blush and smile dopily. He grinned up at him as he unbuckled the man's jeans, pulling them down only to be smacked in the face by his ding dong. Without another word, he swallowed the head and made eye contact, moaning as he plunged his lips further down the length. He pulled off for a moment.
I too easy, no?
He joked before swallowing down half his ding dong, hollowing his cheeks for a tighter suck. Islam couldn't believe this. His mentor, the great Khabib Nurmagomedov, was a gay ding dong sucker. Honestly, that shouldn't have been too surprising, given how tirelessly Khabib glazed Cain Velasquez. But this was nonetheless unprecedented. The guy brought his hand to the back of Khabib's head and began pushing him up and down his length, relishing in how little Khabib was gagging. That only surprised Islam more. Khabib was somehow good at this. More than good. He was leaking all over the mattress just from giving head. This was also so unbelievably uncharacteristic, Islam thought he was dreaming. And well, I'm not going to go any further beyond this point, because the descriptions begin to involve Astroglide, which is a very common item in these stories, and certain other fluids. But you have just now listened to a story of Islam Makhachev sitting in the corner of the hotel while Khabib gets f***ed by a bunch of men. And what's crazy about this fanfiction is, as you guys noticed with Khabib's dialogue, the writer of this fanfiction did their best, and in my opinion, was very successful with nailing the way that Khabib speaks English. The author deliberately left out definite articles, prepositions, and other linking words when writing Khabib's dialogue to mimic that uniquely broken way that Dagestani speak. It is also clear that the author does follow the UFC, as they know that Khabib Nurmagomedov trained with Cain Velasquez back at AKA. And perhaps most importantly, as we'll get to later on, when we analyze why the Khabib and Islam ship is so popular among these fujoshi, the author knows that for Khabib, alcohol and gambling are serious temptations that are forbidden by the Islamic faith, and that gay relationships are obviously haram as well. But anyways, let's move on to another fanfiction from the Khabib and Islam ship, one that is titled While You Sleep and the Entire Morning as well. And while this one was deleted, I've archived it. And yes, this is the one from the thumbnail that has Islam eating Khabib's
secret juice.
And just to give you the gist of the story, it starts with Islam Makhachev giving Khabib Nurmagomedov a note where he says he wants Khabib to do the deed to him while he is sleeping. And what you'll notice with most of these stories is that they mostly have Khabib in top position and Islam Makhachev on bottom, while Khabib lays down most of the ground and pound. This is because Khabib is the big brother of the duo, naturally leading women to write him as the dominant male. So anyways, allow me to read this story about Khabib and Islam's midnight grappling spar in a hotel room. Islam sat cross-legged on the bed, chewing his lip, his cheeks red as he scribbled something onto a folded piece of paper. Khabib was in the bathroom brushing his beard, humming low under his breath. When he emerged, towel around his neck, Islam's heart raced. He held out the folded note with trembling fingers.
What is this?
Khabib asked, brow furrowed, taking it carefully. Islam's voice was small, shy.
Don't open it until I'm asleep.
Khabib studied him for a long moment, eyes narrowing, then nodded slowly.
All right, Isu, I promise.
Then Islam falls asleep, and Khabib reads the note, which says, I want you to take me while I sleep. Don't wake me. Just take me, feel me, breathe me the whole night. I want to wake up ruined in your seed. Please do it. I want to be yours even in my dreams. Khabib's breath caught. His ding-dong hardened instantly, painfully under the thin blanket. His chest heaved, his throat dry.
Islam,
he whispered, staring at his boy's sleeping face.
You'll kill me with this.
He couldn't stop himself. Slowly, gently, he shifted Islam onto his back, spreading his thighs. Islam stirred faintly, his blue eyes fluttering in sleep, but didn't wake. Khabib freed himself, already thick and aching, and pressed into him slow. Islam's soft body opened around him even in dreams, a faint whimper spilling from his lips. Khabib groaned low, his beard brushing Islam's cheek as he whispered,
Yes, my perfect boy. Even asleep, you take me so well. You're mine, Islam. Always mine.
The night blurred into heat, sweat, and primal need. And from here, I will skip to the section where Isu consumes Khabib's
secret juice.
Khabib groaned so deep it shook his chest. He grabbed Islam's wrist, dragging the fingers to Islam's mouth, letting Islam suck his
secret juice
off them.
Fuck Islam. You'll kill me with this.
Islam whimpered, then scooped more, shy but determined. This time, he raised his fingers on his own, licking slowly, eyes fluttering shut.
So warm, so salty. It's you,
he whispered, trembling.
It feels so good, Khabib. I love that you're still inside me.
Now, I first have to say that I believe that the dialogue in this one isn't as good as the last one, unless of course we're assuming that Khabib and Isu are speaking to each other in their native language, and it is being translated by the author. However, what I can also say is that the vast majority of Khabisu fanfiction follows a similar format, with the main themes being forbidden love, Khabib being the dominant partner and Islam being the submissive, and extremely graphic depictions of their grappling sessions. Now, as for the rest of the fanfictions on AO3, a couple pairings that I've seen multiple fanfictions of are the brothers Ilya and Alexander Topuria, Hamza Chimaev and Arman Sarukian, Ian Machado Gary and Carlos Prates, and Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. There's also a story about Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov that is tagged with Pakistani-style chicken tikka masala. And yes, as you may have already guessed, the country and women of Pakistan will be making multiple appearances throughout this video. The most bizarre pairing I've found, though, has to be between the Dagestani UFC light heavyweight Magomed Ankalaev and the Dagestani Olympic gold medalist of freestyle wrestling, Abdul Rashid Sadulayev. And as it says in the description, this story between Ankalaev and Sadulayev takes place 6 months after the two had a falling out in their romantic relationship, and involves a lot of hate and angst as they wrestle throughout the story. Actually, I take it back. The most bizarre pairing has to be Merab Davalishvili and the General Secretary of the USSR, Joseph Stalin, in a story titled Authentic Georgian Wrestling. But the thing is, with this story, there's no way that this one isn't a joke, right? I mean, it is labeled as a crack ship, which is fanfiction slang for being a joke ship, but it also says crack treated seriously. So, yeah, let's just say that I don't want to be in the head of the author who wrote this. And as you may have noticed, the fighters from the Caucasus, and specifically the Dagestanis and other Muslims from that region, seem to be disproportionately popular in these stories. And just to demonstrate what I mean by that, I searched AO3 for stories of popular fighters like Yuri Prohaska, Koji Horiguchi, Manel Kapp, Bilal Muhammad, and even George St. Pierre, and I found nothing. But do you know who I have found fanfiction of on this website? Ikram Aleskerov, Islam Mamedov, and Zubaira Tukagov. I can see some casuals knowing about Ikram, but you gotta have some serious ball knowledge to know about Islam Mamedov and Zubaira Tukagov. Zubaira Tukagov was never ranked in the UFC and hasn't fought since 2023, and Islam Mamedov spent his entire career in Bellator and the PFL. These are fighters that only real hardcores among us MMA fans would know. I genuinely doubt that someone like MMA Che or Bedtime would remember Zubaira Tukagov, and I'm 99% sure they would have never heard about Islam Mamedov. And this fanfiction, titled Ordinary World, which is a quick 219-word long scene of Ikram Aleskerov and Islam Mamedov going at it and then having Zubair walk in on them, it is set right before Ikram's fight against Bruno Ferreira at UFC Baku on June 27th of 2026. The Fujoshi who are writing this fanfiction about the Dagestanis are carefully following every UFC event and planning their fanfiction around that. That is some serious commitment as a fandom. Albeit, I haven't found any fanfiction about the GOAT Shamil Gaziev, and, well, that's hypergamy for you. But as a man, you gotta deal with that reality. But now, as we near the end of this segment, which is already way longer than I planned it to be, let's now talk about the craziest piece of UFC fanfiction I have found on AO3. And that is Like a Friend, a 12-chapter long, 82,075 word alternate universe fanfic starring Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev in a college romance. Just for reference, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is 76,944 words. This fanfiction is the length of an entire novel. And here I'm going to read the summary. College is all about new experiences, and Islam is hoping to finally break out of his shell. Unfortunately, he becomes the carnal obsession of Khabib Nurmagomedov, an unstable loner who will stop at nothing to secure his perfect 4.0 GPA and to keep Islam all to himself. However, things don't always go according to plan, and there are two big problems in the way: Ilia Topuria and Conor McGregor. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with fanfiction, a lot of them take place at colleges or schools. This is mainly because the roots of modern fanfiction writing stem back to writing fanfiction about Harry Potter, which took place at a magical school, and Twilight, which of course was set in an American high school. And well, let's look through the tags on this piece. Forbidden love, fluff and angst, fluff and smut, secret relationship, possessive behavior, doomed relationship, internalized homophobia, corruption, loss of innocence, non-consensual drug use, obsessive behavior, and forced feminization. And this fanfic features other UFC fighters and personalities, including Carlos Prates, Ian Gary, Paddy Pimblett, Michael Morales, Nina Drama, and even features Dana White as the dean of the university. And well, even I couldn't manage to get through this entire thing, so I asked Grok to summarize the piece, and this is what it spit out. The story is set in a modern college/university AU, where prominent UFC fighters are reimagined as students. It centers on Islam Makhachev, a shy, somewhat sheltered newcomer who arrives at college determined to break out of his shell, make friends, and gain new experiences. Khabib Nurmagomedov is introduced as a brilliant but deeply unstable and socially isolated loner obsessed with maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA. He quickly becomes fixated on Islam, not just romantically, but as something he must possess and control completely. Their relationship begins in secret and is intensely one-sided in terms of power and obsession from Khabib's side. Early chapters establish Khabib's possessive, manipulative behavior alongside moments of vulnerability, or fluff, that contrast with his darker traits. Islam is confused, attracted, and increasingly drawn in despite of, or because of, the intensity, while struggling with internalized homophobia and his own emerging sexuality. The relationship escalates rapidly and explicitly. Scenes involve self-training, grappling exchanges that involve both the mouth and the rear end, grappling in the shower, and various power exchange dynamics. Notably, the top and bottom roles switch between the two leads at different points. Khabib's obsession grows more controlling. Possessive behavior, subtle and not so subtle manipulation, and efforts to isolate Islam. Islam experiences a gradual corruption and loss of innocence arc as he's pushed beyond his initial comfort zone. Major conflicts and rivalries drive the middle and later chapters. Ilia Topuria becomes a significant rival and complication. He competes for Islam's attention, creating jealousy, tension, and confrontations. This adds layers of rivalry and external pressure on the secret relationship. Conor McGregor is the other major disruptive force. Charismatic, antagonistic, and chaotic. He has his own complicated interest in both Khabib and Islam, leading to heightened drama, public near exposures, emotional volatility, and a notable male-male-male three-way grappling sequence involving Khabib, Islam, and Conor. This three-way grappling sequence is driven by rivalry, obsession, and blurred lines rather than healthy polyamory. Other supporting characters, like Arman Sarukian, Paddy Pimblett, Nate Diaz, Ian Machado Gary, and others, appear in party scenes, side rivalries, alliances, or as catalysts for conflict, adding to the university setting with drinking, social events, and occasional violence. Darker elements intensify throughout: drunken episodes and verbal degradation, forced feminization as a form of control and humiliation tied to Khabib's possessiveness, non-consensual drug use in certain scenarios, obsessive surveillance and manipulation and unhealthy codependency, physical confrontations and canon-typical violence during heated arguments or fights. The narrative alternates between intimate/fluffy moments, heavy smut, and rising angst. Islam's arc involves growing confidence mixed with confusion, guilt, and emotional damage. Khabib's instability becomes increasingly destructive. Climax and resolution in chapters 9 to 12 involve secrets unraveling through public exposures, major confrontations with Ilya and Connor, emotional breakdowns, and betrayals. Khabib's possessive and unstable nature causes irreversible damage. The story builds to a series of explosive events, where the central relationship fractures under the weight of obsession, rivalry, and external pressures. The ending is doomed and tragic. There is no happy or redemptive resolution. Relationships end in pain, isolation, and consequences. Islam emerges somewhat changed, with more confidence, but carrying emotional scars and a sense of corruption/loss of innocence. Khabib becomes more isolated. The overall tone emphasizes the dangers of toxic obsession, the fragility of secret/unhealthy dynamics, and the idea that some relationships are fundamentally unsustainable. In short, Like a Friend is a dark, explicit, angst-heavy exploration of obsession, forbidden desire, rivalry, and self-discovery gone wrong in a college setting. It delivers on its tags of fluff and angst, fluff and smut, secret relationship, possessive behavior, and doomed romance, while leaning heavily into its darker and more explicit content. And well, if you're wondering about the forced feminization, according to the summary, Khabib forcibly feminizes Islam in chapters 6 through 8 as a method of manipulation and control. And whatever you make of the subject matter, sustaining one doomed obsession arc across 12 chapters and 82,000 words is a real structural achievement. It is essentially a full psychological horror novel, with the possessiveness escalating chapter by chapter, which is far harder to land than a quick one-shot. Anyways, I couldn't read through all of it, so if you want to read it, go find it and have a look yourself. And on that note, I would like to conclude this section on the wild world of UFC fanfiction on AO3. Although I would like to add here at the end that behind Khabib and Islam, the third most popular fighter on AO3 is a guy who has never even fought in the UFC. And well, for all of my regular viewers who I've instilled with my Ryzen knowledge, you may know who it is. Sitting at third place for MMA fanfiction is none other than the extremely popular Ryzen fighter Miura Kota, who has 31 fanfictions of him on AO3. And these fanfictions are confirmed to be about the Ryzen fighter, as this 58,817 word fanfiction titled The Boy Is Mine makes explicit reference to the promotion. So, this means that a Ryzen fighter has more fanfictions than Conor McGregor. Now, if this reality doesn't prove definitively that Ryzen is the number 2 promotion in the world, I don't know what will. First place, Islam Makhachev. Second place, Khabib Nurmagomedov. And third place goes to Miura Kota. But anyways, I've only barely scratched the surface here, so go and check out the site yourself if you want to. At your own risk, of course. And now, let us move on to the next chapter of this video. Wattpad. Out of all the sites that I've parsed through, Wattpad was by far the most tame. And that's in large part because the most popular stories I could find on here that were related to the UFC or mixed martial arts were about completely fictional individuals, which then kind of makes the stories not fanfiction and instead a completely original work, but you know what I mean. For example, this story called Fight For You, with over 7 million views, is about a woman who works as the caregiver for a man with a spinal cord injury who happens to have a professional fighter as a brother. And as far as I can tell, every individual in this story is completely fictional, and while it likely wouldn't suit a guy's taste in fiction, this is completely harmless. I mean, the worst thing I can say about it is this part right here in chapter 9, where the fighter replies, quote, "It's a UFC MMA fight," when he's talking about doing an unsanctioned MMA bout, and the female lead supposedly knows that this fighter is good enough to be in the UFC. albeit that error is completely forgivable since this could simply be the author showing that the female lead lacks knowledge about the levels of competition in fighting. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't some freaky stuff involving actual UFC fighters. For example, there is this one fanfiction from 2017 titled Beastly Devotion. And well, let me read out the description here. Kate Dawson's life was perfect. She had a good job, an amazing fiancé, and a beautiful baby girl on the way. Just when Kate thought things couldn't get any better, everything started falling apart. A heartbreaking miscarriage leaves Kate and her fiancé, UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez, at odds. She can't seem to mourn enough, and he can't seem to mourn at all. After a nasty fallout, Kate's perfect world shatters. Not only did she lose her baby, but she also lost the love of her life. 6 months after receiving the devastating news, Kate returns home from rehab with various antidepressant medications in hand. Knowing she can't bear to see the nursery or any part of the house, she heads to work. Thankfully, her boss, Dana White, welcomes her with open arms and is prepared to do whatever is necessary to keep his friend and assistant from losing her humanity, even if it means letting her control Kane's next opponent at UFC 205. And apparently, this fanfiction won the award for Best Brock Lesnar Fanfiction June 2017. And credit where it is due, the premise is sharper than the genre usually bothers with, building the central conflict around two people grieving a miscarriage at completely different speeds is a mature, character-first dramatic engine, and it's not just celebrity insert fantasy. And the same author here also wrote another fanfiction about Brock Lesnar in 2016 titled Beauty and the Beast, which is similarly about a woman who falls in love with the UFC heavyweight champion. It is quite interesting how the tastes of these fanfiction writers seem to have evolved over time, where over a decade ago they were writing about jacked white boys that you just had to deal with, and now they're writing about jacked Dagestani boys who have tested positive for meldonium in the past. Although, maybe it's the American women who are writing about Brock Lesnar, and a different country's women who are writing about the Dagestani crew. Which leads me to the fanfiction that has been written about Khabib and Islam on Wattpad. And first off, based upon what I have seen here, all of the fanfiction about these two on Wattpad is completely, utterly, and 100% heterosexual. There is no Khabisu on this site. However, there is a commonality between these fanfictions, and here I would like to start with this particular story simply titled Islam Makhachev, Fanfiction. And the summary here reads, a Pakistani doctor, Afsha, marries a Dagestani fighter, Islam Makhachev, in an arranged union. It's a tale of two strangers who, through life's toughest challenges, find a profound and unbreakable connection. Now, I have commented upon this in the past, but the vast majority of the Dagestani fanbase are not Dagestanis, who have a total population of just a little over 3 million people. The vast majority of that fanbase is composed of individuals from countries like Saudi Arabia, India, Indonesia, and of course, Pakistan. And, well, it is quite telling that the love interest for Islam Makhachev in this story is a Pakistani doctor. However, I have to say that this fanfiction of Islam Makhachev, regardless of whatever you want to read into it, is genuinely well written from a prose perspective. And to demonstrate what I mean, allow me to read an excerpt. The air of Makashkala was different, crisp and carrying the scent of the nearby Caspian Sea, yet heavy with the ancient gravity of the Caucasus Mountains that loomed like silent guardians over the city. For Afsha, who had spent her life amidst the bustling, humid warmth of Lahore, it felt like landing on another planet. A month. She had 1 month to acclimatize, to find her footing before the most critical medical exam of her life. Her father, Zaur Makhachev, greeted her with a warmth that surprised her. Years of separation, a divorce that had cleaved her world in two, had faded into the background the moment he wrapped her in a firm, parental hug. He was a Dagestani man, broad-shouldered and with a kind face weathered by time, and he led her into the heart of his world, a large, bustling home where the Makhachev clan lived as one. The family was a whirlwind of new faces and a language she only partially understood. Her stepmother was polite but distant, her gaze assessing. But the true star of the family, the name whispered with reverence, was her cousin, Islam Makhachev. She recognized him instantly from the fight clips her Pakistani cousins sometimes watched. In person, he was quieter, more intense, a formidable presence of disciplined muscle and quiet focus. He offered her a curt nod of welcome, his eyes holding a neutral, almost unreadable expression, before disappearing back into the rhythm of his training-centric life. Afsha's solace was the local hospital where she began her internship. The work was grueling, a constant test of her knowledge and stamina. The language barrier was a significant hurdle. She could grasp the gist of conversations, but struggled to articulate complex medical terms, often relying on gestures and a well-worn pocket dictionary. Yet, she persevered. She treated every patient with a disarming kindness, her smile a universal language that bridged the gap. And now, except for using quieter and quiet one after another to describe Islam Makhachev's demeanor, I think that this is some serviceable prose. It is genuinely better written than some traditionally published novels like Lightlark and Zodiac Academy. And yes, to all of you ladies that somehow ended up stumbling across this video because you wanted to call me a misogynistic pig that doesn't know what he's talking about, yes, I do have book talk ball knowledge. So, don't make any assumptions about people, okay? But anyways, another point worth noting about this excerpt is how the love interest has been adopted into Islam Makhachev's family, and is now Islam's cousin. I believe this narrative decision was made for the purpose of injecting realism into this story, as both Dagestan and Pakistan are known for their high rates of cousin marriage, as I've explored in detail based on academic analysis and statistics in a previous video. By having the main love interest become a cousin of Islam's, and then eventually becoming married to him in an arranged marriage, which is still commonplace in Pakistan, the author makes the prospect of Afsha being married to Islam Makhachev far more realistic. And since this is a fanfiction, the character of Afsha is most likely a stand-in for the author or the reader, meaning that relatability through realism aids in immersion. Anyways, leaving that bit of structuralist literary criticism aside, I have to say that arranged marriage is a trend regarding the fanfictions about Islam Makhachev. This is the case with another story titled Bound, which, I'm going to be frank, was borderline unreadable due to the lack of spaces between words, and this one titled Hope, Islam Makhachev. And regarding the latter, this one is interesting because it is explicitly Islamic fanfiction, with the author expressing her admiration towards Islam Makhachev because of his religious devotion. And in the text itself, as short as it is, there are instances of the female lead saying Islamic prayers and practices like the Fajr prayer and ritual cleansing session that is wudu. So I really have to come to the conclusion that Wattpad really does seem to have the tamest fanfictions out of all of the sites I have seen. There is nothing explicit or graphic in these stories, and they all involve Habib and Islam in heterosexual marriages. But if you were craving the crazy stuff, we are about to get back to that, because up next, we're going to discuss the wildness of UFC Tumblr. Now, first off, I have to say this. The ladies on this site were keenly aware that I was going to make this video about this community of theirs, and they were quite worried about what I was going to uncover. When I first learned about this side of the fanbase, I posted a few tweets saying I was going to make a video about the fanfictions, and at the time, I really thought nothing of it. But then, when I eventually made a Tumblr account for the purpose of looking through tags like hashtag UFC, hashtag UFC Blur, and hashtag Khabisu on the website, I came across the following posts. OMG, they found us, y'all. Mom, I'm scared, come pick me up. Sweating emoji. Nah, there's going to be a YouTube vid made. Bro, why can't they mind their business? And the comments under this post included, why are men always in our business? Get out, this is for girls only. Tumblr getting discovered by MMA chuds on Twitter wasn't in my bingo card. There was even a post mentioning me by name with the Dustin Poirier, "It's gonna be bad, my N-word" meme attached to it, which I thought was rather humorous. There was quite a bit of talk about deleting accounts, deleting fanfictions, and making accounts private to prevent the incoming onrush of Twitter chuds and the exposure that the video you are watching right now will give this community. And as was noted in some comments on these posts, the number of fanfictions had indeed decreased, meaning that there is a chance that the most sensitive content has been destroyed by the time I'm releasing this. And on top of all of this, I even received a DM on Instagram from a female user with an Arabic name begging me to censor the usernames for these fanfictions, which is why I decided to do that for this video. After seeing how reactive this community was to my presence, I ended up feeling like an explorer who had gone into an uncharted area and disturbed the natural order of things. I felt like by posting the tweets that I did, I had caused these individuals to act in an unnatural way. So, I decided to delete my tweets regarding the fanfiction. And sure enough, one user posted, "I just wanted to make this post to say that the Twitter chud saying he would expose the UFC fix deleted all his posts about the situation. Hopefully, that means we can all be one again." Gift not mine, by the way. And under this post, there were replies of, "Wait, seriously? Thank God." And "That is amazing. I feel so relieved." So please be aware that there is a significant possibility that large chunks of the content that I'm showing in this video may be deleted if you decide to look for it. And a reminder, if you do, please don't harass the authors or creators, as these are mostly timid people sharing something deeply personal, and some of them have real reasons to fear being identified, so please just leave them completely alone. However, I will also say in my own personal defense that I'm not really exposing anything as this user is claiming. Everything on these websites is publicly viewable, and you don't even need a Tumblr, Wattpad, or AO3 account to read these fanfictions. And if any of the authors would rather keep their work fully private, that is completely fair. One low-key option is to keep it somewhere closed off, like a private Discord server or a Telegram chat. But anyways, moving on, the key difference between Tumblr and the other websites is how on Tumblr, visual content can be posted in addition to written content. And well, the visual content on tags like #UFC and #UFCblur is what you would expect. Let's get started with this photo of Usman Nurmagomedov with, "Girls, nobody is ever gonna convince me this man is faithful. Sorry, not sorry. In my mind, he's cheating, and a lot. Girl, there's no way this man is faithful. He's such a liar. But he can lie to me for the rest of my life if he wants." And then, here is a photo of pregnant Ilya Tapuria, with the following comments underneath it. "Peak illustration for peak dreams. The Ilya Mpreg Dream Saga." And of course, Mpreg is shorthand for male pregnancy, which is a popular genre in the fanfiction sphere. Next, here is a post reacting to Islam Makhachev cooking some sausages with the reaction, "I want his sausage too." And here's a post with a video of Khabib and Islam grappling, with Khabib getting positions like back mount and setting up submissions like the triangle choke, which is most likely supposed to make the viewer feel certain things. And then here is a post with a tweet in it that is captioned with, well, you can read it for yourself. And frankly, there is so much visual content, including some fan art of Islam Makhachev that I have to keep blurred out here, that I can't really go through all of it here. However, a very significant amount of it includes shirtless photos of Khabib, Islam, and other fighters from the Caucasus. Now, moving on to the fanfiction, what's interesting about Tumblr is that you will see requests for fanfiction from different users. For example, here is a user being asked for Shah Magomedov fanfiction, and a reply saying that she will oblige. There's even talk about fighters from Khabib's team that I hadn't even heard about before, like Aliyev Aligadze, a 2-0 Dagestani prospect fighting in Eagle FC. As I said before, when it comes to the ball knowledge about the Kavkaz fighters, these Fujoshi are without equal in the MMA community. And then there are sort of philosophical discussions about the ships and couples on this platform as well, with an example of this being a post discussing whether Khabisu is a regular alpha-omega pairing. And here I will read aloud parts of this post. "I can't imagine Khabisu being regular alpha-omega. Khabib being an alpha with Islam being the omega, or even the other way around, though the thought is awesome. I see them being alpha-alpha. Khabib raised on becoming/being an alpha and expected to uphold to the image of one set by society or whatever." What is worth flagging here is less the conclusion than the method, because this is genuine interpretive character work. She treats alpha-omega not as a set of smut mechanics, but rather as a lens for identity, reading two real fighters' public personas against the genre's defaults, deciding the standard power imbalance version does not suit them, and reaching instead for the rarer alpha-alpha framing. And this is a real critical instinct, subverting a convention rather than merely deploying it, and grounding the subversion in how these men were actually raised and what they are expected to be. But Islam, to me, seems like he'd be raised or thought of by his family as an omega because of how much softer he looks than others. But once he presents as an alpha, all that changes. He has to learn through peers, family, internet, books on information about alpha expectations and shit. This would cause insecurity that he battles with before he eventually is all like, "F it, we ball," finding a way to be at peace with himself and his self-image as a newfound alpha. Religion's also a part of this, obviously, but I've never been, so I don't know how to write that in. Like the internalization and religious guilt, along with their trust in God and faith and how it helps or hurts their self-image and way of life, I don't know. The traditional relationship being alpha-omega and the inability of upholding that would strike Khabib the hardest. He'd catch feelings first. He'd think about Islam, dream about him, and the thought of a future together. But when he gets back to reality, he'd try to stop himself and think of how he'll disappoint family and what would father think? All that stuff. How he doesn't want to commit sin. Islam slowly falls in love, confused at first, but he keeps it to himself way better than Khabib, thinking it's unreciprocated. That's until Khabib's internal battle starts to become noticeable to others, even affecting his training and fights. And then, I don't know, I'll continue this later, sweating emoji. And well, regarding what I think about this topic, I will actually be making a reference to this post later on in this video in the chapter titled, Why Khabisu?, where I talk about why Khabib and Islam is the most popular romantic coupling there is. But moving on, there are also accounts that post links to the fanfiction which they publish on AO3 on here, with an example being this account which posted a Khabisu fanfiction titled Warda ala Warda, which means rose upon rose in Arabic, about Islam Makhachev having Hanahaki disease. Hanahaki in Japanese means flower vomiting, and Hanahaki byo translates to flower vomiting disease. Hanahaki disease is a subgenre of fanfiction that consists of the diseased individual vomiting up flower petals due to suffering from kataomoi, which is the Japanese word for one-sided, unrequited love. And while I won't go through this fanfiction at length, the use of Arabic phrases like warda ala warda and kia ala kia, the latter of which translates to layer upon layer, is suggestive that the author has a grasp of the Arabic language. And then there's this Hamzat Shemaya fanfiction that was posted in its entirety on Tumblr that was captioned with, "Fuck it, we ball. I hope the male Twitter losers find this bullshit." And well, the male Twitter loser has found it, so it seems that your hope is fulfilled. Though, for what it is worth, I truly am glad to have had a chance to experience your unique perspective, which was entirely new to me. I will not reproduce the whole thing, it runs long and gets explicit, but it is worth talking about because the tension it is built upon is basically the entire thesis of the piece. It opens quietly. The apartment is quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside your window. You're curled up on the couch in nothing but an oversized sleep shirt that barely reaches right below your waist and a pair of cotton short shorts underneath. Comfortable, innocent, the kind of thing you'd never think twice about wearing alone at home on a lazy evening. Until you hear the key turn in the lock. Your heart jumps. You'd forgotten Hamzat said he might stop by after his evening training session. Before you can even think about changing into something more substantial, the door swings open and there he is. All 6 feet 2 inches of solid muscle, gym bag slung over one shoulder, hair still damp from the shower. His eyes find you immediately. And then they stay there. You watch his jaw tighten, watch the way his grip on the door handle turns his knuckles white. He doesn't move from the threshold, doesn't step inside, just stares at you with an intensity that makes your skin prickle with awareness. "Hamzat," you say softly, pulling your knees up instinctively. "I didn't think you'd be here so soon." He finally moves, closing the door behind him with deliberate slowness. When he speaks, his accent is thicker than usual, rougher. "You always dress like this when you're home alone?" There's something in his voice, something dark and hungry that makes heat pool low in your belly. You glance down at yourself, suddenly hyper-aware of how thin the fabric is, how much skin is showing. "It's just comfortable," you say, trying to sound casual even as your pulse quickens. "I wasn't expecting your company." Hamzat drops his bag by the door but doesn't come closer. He stands there, hands flexing at his sides like he's physically restraining himself. His eyes trace over you, your bare legs, the way the shirt drapes over your curves, the delicate line of your collarbone.
"You should put something else on,"
he says finally, his voice strained. She then presses him on why, and then Hamzat dances around it, and then he admits the real problem, that he does not trust himself around her, and the whole exchange just tightens up the same knot of wanting her and fearing what he could do, which is where the thesis of this entire piece drops. "I'm not made of glass."
"Compared to me, you are."
His thumb finally makes contact, brushing across your cheekbone with such careful reverence it makes your eyes flutter closed.
"So soft, so delicate, and I want..."
His voice drops to barely a whisper.
"I want you so badly, it hurts."
And then what follows is the grappling spar scene itself, which I will summarize rather than read out. He surrenders, kisses her, and the author describes this as like your oxygen and he's been drowning, and Hamzat carries her to the bed, undresses her, but never once drops the careful giant framing, and when she teases that he is supposed to be the dangerous one, he agrees and then insists on going slow anyway. And well, as you can tell from the second person's perspective that this story is written in, this is a story about Hamzat being intimately involved with the reader. The second person perspective is important here because it aids in conveying the visual imagery of Hamzat Chimaev speaking with and touching the reader, which evokes a sense of arousal in individuals from the intended audience. And to prove that this is the case, you can see this Tumblr user commenting, "This was so good, a white tear just ran down my leg." And really, there is a lot more content like this on Tumblr, so find it yourself if you want to have a look at it. But now, as we near the end of this video, let's discuss the all-important question you might be wondering about after learning about this side of the fandom. And that is, why Khabisu? Now, I believe there are three key factors that explain why Khabisu is far and ahead the most popular UFC fanfiction pairing. And the first factor is simple, and it's why exactly BL fanfiction is so popular with women. If you go online, you will find loads of fanfiction with pairings like Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy from the Harry Potter books, Bakugo and Deku from My Hero Academia, Gon and Killua from Hunter x Hunter, Taehyung and Jungkook, and so on and so on. And well, in the past, I have not only interacted with, but also befriended women who consume this content. And as for how I got to know them, well, I am a citizen of the country where this subculture was first created, as you may have been able to tell based off of my pronunciation of Japanese terminology. When I spoke with these women about why they were interested in this content, the common theme across their answers was that reading these male-on-male romances made them feel safer than reading heterosexual romances. In a romance between a male and a female, the reader is likely to self-insert into the female character. This means that if anything traumatic or harmful happens to the lead female, the reader may end up feeling emotionally distressed as a consequence. In contrast, with BL, there is no female for the reader to self-insert into, meaning that the reader can consume more aggressive, angstful, and extreme content. As you may have noticed, the UFC fanfictions involving heterosexual pairings tend to involve much less angst, emotional tension, and drama than the ones with homosexual ones. The appeal of this genre of fiction lies in how the female reader can enjoy the tension and drama of a romance without feeling threatened by it. But now that we have that established, let's move on to the two other factors that explain why Khabisu is the most popular ship. The second factor is that these two have a very clear dynamic that is easy for women to project their fantasies onto. As the Tumblr user was philosophizing earlier on regarding whether Khabisu is a typical alpha-omega pairing or not, the real-life Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev really are brothers by everything besides blood. They have known each other since they were children, they have trained together their entire lives, and they have a sort of rivalry between themselves regarding who is the greater fighter. Add a bunch of videos of them grappling together and hugging after fights to celebrate, and you get a duo that is very easy to project romantic feelings onto. But We have seen other strong male friendships in mixed martial arts like Sean Strickland and Chris Curtis, Justin Gaethje and Kamaru Usman, and Merab Dvalishvili and Aljamain Sterling. So why exactly is it that Khabisu is so much more popular than those pairings? Well, part of it has to do with the sheer popularity of Khabib in Islam, and especially Islam since many women consider him to be handsome. But I don't think it's just that. And that leads me to the third factor, which is the forbiddenness of Khabisu. As I've gone over before, the majority of Khabib and Islam's fanbase resides in the Muslim world. And based on the fanfiction that we have gone over in this video, it is very clear that many of the women writing these stories about Khabib and Islam are women from countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, and the Arabic-speaking world. As I said earlier, the woman who messaged me on Instagram had an Arabic username, and heck, I even found one Tumblr user who explicitly said that she will be writing from Qatar from this point onward. And I believe that this is a major reason as to why Khabisu is as popular as it is. In the Islamic faith, homosexuality is considered haram, with the punishment in many Muslim countries being the death penalty. And this forbidden, taboo nature of the pairing is precisely what makes it so tempting. Forbidden romance is a cornerstone of literature, as it appeals to that primal human desire to transgress boundaries. And perhaps, for many of these Muslim women, who are living in very traditional societies that do limit what they're allowed to wear, who they are allowed to marry, and how they want to live their lives, perhaps these stories about Khabisu are a way for them to escape that reality and enter a forbidden fantasy that remains relatable to them. And to further reinforce this point, here are a few X accounts that have posted Khabisu-related content on Twitter and the countries they are based out of. This one is based in West Asia, which is another term for the Middle East. This account is based in Indonesia, and this one is located in Saudi Arabia. And I've even found this one that is posting Khabisu content right out of Iraq. Many of these women are living in societies that don't allow them to express themselves in the real world, making fanfiction about Dagestani fighters an outlet for them. And that is why you should feel some level of sympathy for them. But anyways, now that analysis behind the popularity of Khabisu is out of the way, let's now move on to the conclusion of this video. To conclude this now enormous video, I just want to end on a note about the freedom of expression. Just like how the Fujoshi are free to write these stories about fighters, I am free to express my thoughts and opinions about said stories, as they are publicly available and not behind a paywall. And if a fighter like Khabib Nurmagomedov or Islam Makhachev were to happen to learn about the existence of these stories, they too would be free to express whatever they feel about them being written. That might be anger, it might be disgust, it might be a request to delete the stories. Who knows? I mean, if Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis found out about their fanfictions, I'd imagine Strickland would go on a whole rant on Twitter about how he's totally not gay, while Dricus would be just like, yeah, I kiss men, deal with it. But anyways, I know I may have angered many Fujoshi by making this video, so I would like to leave you all with this. As a return for having made this video, I will give you all my full consent to write any fanfiction you want about me. Go ahead. Now, you might have to guess what I look like, but really I do look very Asian, maybe trending a bit more towards the white than the Asian. So please, go ahead with that. It's the least I can do. I am a firm believer in artistic and creative freedom, and I don't want any of you to feel ashamed to be writing this. So, on that note, thank you everybody for watching the video. Goodbye.